This is Coda Radio, episode 14 for September 10th, 2012. Hi everyone, you're listening to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Good morning, Chris.
Good afternoon to you, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I have my tinfoil hat perfectly fitted, so I think we're good to go.
Yeah, we definitely got our good conspiracy charge before the show started on the live show this morning. But, I think it put us in the right frame of mind because we're talking about the B team today, aren't we?
Indeed, we are. These are the A team that didn't quite make it.
Like, perhaps Windows Phone. Or maybe in some cases might still have a chance, right? Like the Kindles, the new Kindle Fire tablets could take off big.
Hope springs eternal, I'm sure.
Yeah. So you must have been watching pretty closely the Kindle announcements this week.
I was actually watching both Windows Phone and the Kindle announcements. I'd say over the last 2 weeks.
Well, I stayed pretty close to the announcements myself. I've seen some of the first hands-on video reviews, and I've got some thoughts too. So I know that's something we're going to jump into. Plus, we've got some cool things that have been sent in by the audience. So should we start with feedback?
Yep, let's go through it. Many of them are quick. So the first one, a number of people wrote in asking why I always say open source instead of free software, because I don't mean free software. In my line of business, free software is a risk. So when I say open source, I literally mean liberally licensed open source, BSD, Apache, things like that.
Risk in what sense?
If I accidentally use free software, it creates a lot of liability for me. Because
you will then have to be responsible for contributing back any modifications you made to that code?
Well, no, the problem is my client would then have to contribute, in the worst case, everything I did back, and I'd be liable for
And if it was something that
damages.
they wanted to have competitive advantage over.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not that I think open source means both. I'm simply excluding it.
Okay.
Because it is an intense legal risk for a consultant.
Right. Yeah.
Unless your client specifically knows going in, and many of mine, they don't understand Apache.
Right.
So I'm not in the market where GPL would ever be acceptable.
Yeah, I can understand. They wouldn't want to reveal any competitive secrets. I have a client who has other competitive companies that have written bots that troll their site to collect the information, and then they repost it on sort of a similar, almost sort of mock-up version of my client's site. And it's this. So they're even trying to figure out ways to obscure code and things like that.
Yeah. So there are places where it's not perhaps appropriate.
Yeah.
So moving right along, another Michael, i.e. not me, wants to know if maybe Macs have become popular with developers because their employers buy them, and suggests that perhaps these developers wouldn't pay for them themselves if it were their money. Maybe, but what I would say is the effect is once you get a good tool chain going, it's very tempting just to stay within that platform. For instance, if you have all your setup on Mac or your setup on Ubuntu, moving between different platforms might be, say moving to Windows would be a bit of a shock.
Oh, sure. I mean, and just the time of setting up your work environment can take a couple of days in some cases, or sometimes it takes a week or two to get things really the way you need them all and have all of the right programs configured quickly, and that is expensive. Just that time is expensive.
Yeah, I mean, he makes a good point. Certainly an IT department, supplying a developer or a team of developers may be more comfortable with purchasing from Apple than, say, buying Windows PCs and repaving them.
That's interesting. I think the other thing to consider is work culture, especially for developers, is changing. And in a lot of cases, it's becoming more mobile, that, working from home, working at the office, working at the coffee shop. And one of the things that Apple has done, and this has become a competitive advantage, is these Apple stores are repair locations as well. So independent workers who aren't quite as connected to an IT department as the traditional worker at their desk is, they're able to take their work laptop in and have it repaired at a completely work authorized repair center. Like, you can't work employees can't always take their laptop just anywhere to have it fixed, but taking it back to the vendor is always okay. And it's sort of like this really convenient scenario for that work case.
And there's also, in the consumer development space, you're generally dealing with also a team of developers and then a team of designers. And in my experience, the vast majority of graphics designers prefer Macs.
Yeah.
So it's really easy. And also, for the business people, you can buy Excel for Mac. And there is some value in standardizing on one platform.
Yeah, I think though there's still a huge. I think there's a huge market that's larger than the Mac market, potential Mac market, in terms of people who just won't pay more than $900 for a computer.
Yeah, I think there's a market. I think if it were possible, if there were like an Ubuntu store, I think you could see them chip away a little bit. But I think Chris is right about the physical location. It's going to matter a lot.
Yeah, taking it into that store is huge.
Yeah.
Getting support,
So,
getting it repaired.
I mean, the closest company I could say that I've actually seen considered is System 76. And in the case where they were actually being considered by a client of mine, the fact that they don't have a physical presence anywhere near the New York area was the deal breaker.
Oh, well, the solution there is just buy two. Don't you wish? Don't you? And what the crazy thing is in some work environments, that's how important it is. So it just depends.
Yeah. So again, it's a business by business decision, but there is a lot of value in having easy to find repair centers. So
Yeah,
take it for what it's worth.
Yeah.
We can't, Michael. It's hard to decide why people do what they do.
I think it's an interesting idea. I think the logic he's going with there is, well, maybe people are going with Macs because employees are buying it, which is essentially implying because they're not having to bear the full cost themselves, right? Like and I thought about that myself because I would really like a new computer,
right,
to take to my clients, and I can't really afford Mac money. That's just too much money for me. Even if Ubuntu ran amazing on the Mac, I would probably still go with something else. Even though from a technical standpoint, I appreciate their build and their design, and I'm a fan of their hardware. But from a practicality standpoint, when it comes to my own money, I just don't know if I can do it.
So I'm in the opposite position. The vast majority of my revenue comes from Apple-related projects. I can't not afford to have Macs.
I feel like that in terms of my video production pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, there comes a point where you get so tied to a platform. I mean, I'm probably more tied than you are.
I would, if today, if after a quarter radio, the streaming machine died, I would go out and I would pay full price for a Mac Pro, and I wouldn't even have to, there wouldn't even be another option for me. I wouldn't necessarily feel great about that price, but in that work class, it is a tool, and I have to have certain requirements. I need PCI expansion slots, I need to run Mac OS X, and it needs to be extremely stable and fast. Well, the only thing that meets those requirements is a Mac Pro. It doesn't matter if it's a computer or not. If you look at it just as a tool to do a job, it's the only thing that can do that job for me, unless I build a Hackintosh.
We have a perfect war story about this. I might as well use it now, I guess.
Okay.
Last week, I was working late in the evening. I had a cup of steaming hot coffee. I dropped it on my MacBook Pro.
Oh, no.
Thing's a brick.
Pro? Uh-oh, that's not the cheap one either.
No, it is not. So what did I do?
What?
I let it air out for a few days.
Yeah.
Or for a day,
Yeah.
I should say. Next morning, I went right to the Apple store, bought a MacBook Air.
Really?
It's a vital part of my tool chain. I can't not have it.
Yeah. It's one of those things where if that's how you make your money and it dies, there's really not a cost too high unless it's higher than your potential to make money.
And I was conservative, so the machine I bought is the 4 gigabyte model. I actually wrote a blog post about it. With half the RAM, it's still faster than the Pro.
Really? You think so?
Because of I can feel it. We're compiling. We're doing.
Did you not have Did you have an SSD in your MacBook Pro?
No, it was a 500 gigabyte, 5400 RPM.
Oh, yeah.
So it was an older MacBook Pro.
The SSD makes a huge difference.
Yeah, a big difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not happy that I had to spend the money, but if it's part of your tool chain, there comes a point where you just have to put it aside. And
no, that's interesting. See, I'm different. See, while I can look at the MacBook Air and I can appreciate it, to me, it's there's the cost benefit ratio isn't there, primarily because I'm a technician and I need Ethernet and things like that, and I don't want dongles. But when it comes to the Mac Pro, I'd probably, if I had to buy a Mac Pro tower, I'd probably spend $6,500 on that machine, because that's the, but so I can totally understand why you'd be like, okay, I got to go out and get this MacBook Air, because it's the same kind of mindset.
Right.
That's why our emailers' logic to me makes sense, that perhaps it's the workplace that's sort of doing this. But if you look at Apple's quarterly calls, when they report and the analysts call in and they ask these questions, they've asked Apple, what is driving Apple adoption in the enterprise? And Apple's standard response for 4 or 5 years now has always been, it's BYOE, bring your own equipment. And it's people bringing iPads, people bringing iPhones, and people bringing their own laptops into the IT environment that's causing the adoption there. So I don't think it's actually because businesses are buying them. If you were to look at the overall trends, I don't think that's it, but I think it's a contributor.
I think there's certain spaces where they dominate, and the IT departments are buying them, though. One of them would be about every incubator I've worked with. They're 100% Apple shops.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Even the accountants run Macs, and the lawyers do.
That's a lost opportunity for Ubuntu.
Yeah. Well, what happens is, they just buy them in volume, and that's it.
Schools are a huge, where IT buys Macs, and then that's what people use. But yeah.
All right, we should move off of this, though, because it's So Costas, I'm terribly sorry because I just murdered your name, writes in regarding the open source business models. We had this debate last week, Chris, about Nicholas wrote in.
Yes.
And it was kind of a little bit of a mess.
Yeah.
So he writes, quote, "In my opinion, the only people who can afford to experiment with this are people whose lives do not depend on the revenue from their software. So that leaves just hobbyists and college students."
I don't know. That seems a little black and white to me, because I think the more common scenario is somebody's working a day job and they start this other thing on the side and they slowly, nurse it to life and build its own momentum. And then when it's ready, they jump from their day job to that thing they've started. I think that's maybe, I don't know, who releases an app just out of the blue and just all of a sudden that's how they're earning their money? No, but that's not really how it works.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree. I see a lot more open source than I did in the past.
Yeah. But it's more infrastructure, wouldn't you say?
It's more infrastructure, and the open source, quote, application level stuff I'm seeing is from college students.
That's interesting.
What I would say is that he has a point. Unless you're employed by somebody, like for me, open sourcing CodeJournal would be suicide. It would be crazy. Not that it makes enough to run the business. It's just there's no benefit to me. But if I were employed somewhere and perhaps looking for a promotion, that might be a big portfolio piece.
It's still a good portfolio piece as closed source, though. Open sourcing doesn't necessarily make it.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
I mean, it helps, I'm sure, and especially for some jobs, I bet it really helps. But if in terms of just look what I've done, here's my past work, I don't really think, because the people making the decision often aren't going to look at the source code. I don't know.
And then we can get into the whole open core debate, which I think is a discussion for another day. But
I think at the end of the day, if you can quantify the value that having contributors, if you could look at Chrome and Chromium. Good example. Chrome, the closed proprietary product. Chromium, the open source project that has hundreds of people contributing to it all the time. If some sort of model like that is feasible, it's just application specific. It's project specific.
And I think Chrome has the backing of Google. Nobody's not eating because Chrome doesn't do well.
Right.
I think his point is like the independent developer. So basically me, someone like me.
Yeah.
It is certainly more risky than the proprietary model. I mean, I tend to agree with him, to be honest. I think to do true, free software, see, guys happy, is dangerous if you're running an independent software company, if that's your main revenue stream, unless you're a consultant and you're just doing it to drive business. Open core is probably the way people would go. And I see a lot of open core right now. A lot of open core.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a model that's picking up. But unfortunately, I don't have numbers to back that up. So maybe, Chris, we should look into it and get back to everybody.
It's definitely something to watch.
So I don't know what people are doing I know what I'm doing, but on the wide scale, I couldn't say.
Yeah.
All right. So a writer named Mike, 2 mics in a row.
Nice.
Writes in because he's learning Python and wants to know what GUI toolkit to use.
Oh.
I don't know because I don't know what platform you're developing on, and I don't know enough about Python GUI development. I would say if you're using Ubuntu, they have the Glade tool that hooks into GTK. That's very good for Ubuntu. Take a look at that. If you're not, I know GTK is the common choice, but a little more information would be helpful. What you might want to do is perhaps in the comments on jupiterbroadcasting.com, repost your question, and I'm sure the listeners can actually give you a little more detail.
I got a call out for PyQt in the chat room from Brother Lou. I bet he's Linux. You know, Python and Linux, they're two flavors that go well together.
He's probably Linux and he's probably Ubuntu, right? So I know GTK is the popular choice. I've heard of PyQt. The problem is we don't know what you're trying to do specifically. We don't know how comfortable. Like if you already know GTK from some other stack, I'd say stick with GTK. But if you're completely green, it's tough. You're going to have to figure out which way to go.
Yeah.
And I would ask the community because I'm assuming you're on the Linux side, there are much more experienced Linux developers in the community that use Python on a daily basis. They can probably guide you better than I can because I'd say use Objective-C.
That's not helpful at all.
Oh. All right. So Brian writes in to ask why we don't cover the other JVM languages. So he means like Scala, Grails,
okay,
JPython. We should, and we will.
The future is full of possibilities.
It's only episode 14. I have nothing against the JVM. Now, in his letter, he does assert that he thinks Java will eventually be replaced.
Oh.
I don't see that happening.
Have you met Oracle? They keep screwing up a lot.
Yeah, but how many people actually have their careers as Java developers?
Yeah,
to,
oh boy.
To retool all those developers would be...
Yeah. Oh boy, yeah.
It would be hard.
Yeah. A lot of people. That's a lot. It's a really... I mean, that is...
It's a big market.
That's what's keeping them... That's what's keeping them relevant. That's the only thing.
Yeah.
Future down the road. I
don't see it being replaced. I do see, for data-intense things, I know Scala is becoming very, very popular. I would see this is one of those things. Once the technology stack falls out of favor, everybody starts gambling on its death. And Fortran's still being written today.
Right.
So is COBOL.
Yeah. Well,
Java's not going to die.
We're all silly about this stuff because none of this stuff really ever goes away. At least it hasn't yet. Although we all think something's gonna. I mean, I guess a few things do, but like anything that has the predominance that Java has now, it's got so much life left in it. Like a ridiculous.
Yeah, and we talked about a few weeks ago that Flash was dead, and so were the adjoining tool sets, so Adobe Air, and we got a number of emails from people saying, "Nah, in fact, that's not true. There's plenty of Air development going on. In fact, Adobe has." For the most part, cleaned up their security issues.
Well, and remember, I think in that episode, I said I wouldn't be surprised if people wrote in and said that it's still active because there's just momentum there. However, I would still, and I wonder if anybody addressed this, I would still pose this, and maybe somebody can write into coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com and correct me. But can anybody point to a large game shop that's going to take a commercial risk on Air now? I just couldn't imagine anybody would. But I don't know.
But that's not a fair question.
Why? Don't you think?
The vast majority of large game companies have their own engines, or they're using Unreal and they're writing in C++.
So what would be the benchmark then?
Indie game developers. They're the people not using C++ and Unreal or things like that because it's too expensive, too time consuming.
Yeah.
Now, what's hurting Air is actually Unity.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I bet.
Because Unity is giving them more professional power with C# and to a point JavaScript, but it seems like C# seems to be the preferred language. So it's a more manageable language, and XNA was doing well. I don't think Adobe Air is losing its market to Unreal, to the AAA studio tools. Unity is hurting. Unity's went from nowhere to one of the top dogs in the indie space.
Yeah, well, in large part to their fast embrace of
mobile. Yeah, and it's one code base, more or less, that you can run on a number of platforms.
Shows you what a contender mobile is now.
Well, sure. I mean, a lot of game revenue comes from mobile. It's rare, honestly, I think, because what I'm seeing on the Mac App Store is these iPad games are iPad first
Yeah.
and then ported to Mac.
Yeah. How hard is that?
If you wrote it natively, it's not terrible.
Yeah, see, that's really clever of Apple. So they've made it really easy for developers to monetize on both platforms, and they've made really easy to use app stores.
And what's really interesting is that the API, so AppKit and UIKit, are converging. Every major release, they're becoming more and more similar, more and more shared APIs.
Have you spent any time, and I won't spend too much time on this, but have you spent any time in the Windows 8 App Store?
I have. I've been trying to see kind of how it's laid out, what can be expected.
What do you think?
I like the UX. The problem is there's not really any paid apps right now, or there wasn't when I looked a few days.
You know what I find really surprising? There's not a search function.
Well, I think they're just gimping it because it's not a public release, and they don't want to deal with.
Yeah, it's really like there's pretty bare bones right now in there.
Yeah, but it has potential. I mean, I would say it's no more. You know, there's no reason to think it's going to be any worse off than Google Play or the Apple App Store.
I have to say, I found the Evernote application to be actually a pretty compelling application, and they also have a OneNote MX application, which is a Metro-only UI, also very compelling.
It's interesting. The few Metro apps I've used have been really, really good.
I've used a couple of stinkers, but like the Twitter app is also, there's a Twitter app that's in there, so there's some good stuff. I think I've been a little too harsh on it, but as of right now, in terms of selection, it's a
so that's the
ghost
problem. The problem is going to be getting mindshare, which we're going to end up talking about a bit later.
All right.
So the next thing I want to just cover briefly is I mentioned the Go language last week. A lot of people have a lot of strong opinions.
This is from Google, right?
Google's Go, yeah.
So we've gotten a lot of emails that says we keep forgetting to mention this.
And then last week I mentioned it, and I got a lot of emails saying, "Yay, Go is great," and a lot of people saying, "You're crazy, Go sucks."
Wow.
So I think Go is going to get an episode.
Oh, a whole episode on Go.
Yeah.
Have you used it?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But I want to do more on it first.
Okay.
I think it's going to have to come after this release cycle because a number of companies are releasing new development platforms. So we're kind of, how we were in the beginning of the summer where we had to cover them all. Mm-hmm. Same thing now.
Yeah, we got a lot of big stuff coming up, don't we?
We do.
Yeah. That's all right. This will give us something to look forward to once we get through the storm.
Yeah, we're through the storm, and there's a lot of strong opinions, Chris. A lot of intense, kind of scary opinions, but that's okay.
Okay.
Let's let it go.
All right.
All right. The next two are yours.
Oh, all righty. Okay. So the next one, the first one is an app. Actually, they're both apps. This one came from Not Brian T in the chat room, and I think he's in there right now, but he usually is. But if he's not, you can catch him if you go in there sometime. It's an app made for Android, and it's cleverly called Callisto. And he sent this in because he wanted people to know about it because he made it GPL. So if people out there in the Coder Radio audience would like to take a look at this, you can track him down. He's got a Google Code page where he has all the source code posted, and this is a neat app too. Michael, I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but it lets you play the live stream, so people could listen to Coder Radio live, and you can also then toggle over and join the IRC, so you can be listening to the stream and use the IRC chat room through the app. It's also got our calendar on there and a contact button, so you can send in feedback to the shows, and you can also play the back catalog, so you could go and get back episodes of Coder Radio on this app. So, in fact, he has in his screenshots Unlucky 13 featured.
Interesting.
Very cool.
I'm looking at it now on the Play Store, and I'm trying to download it, and Google Play is being obnoxious, so I'll do it later. It looks very nice, I have to say.
And I'm really impressed that he went GPL, and he said he specifically went GPL, so that way if the audience wanted to play along with him and add features and work with him on stuff, he'd be totally down for that. So here, I'll put a link in the chat room.
I mean, I know our project has kind of slowed down a bit.
Well, I think it's neat to see multiple things going, too, at the same time, because people can take ideas. We have a couple of apps now in the Android market, and they're all a little different, and people get to choose which one they like.
And this appears to be native, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So any aspiring Java or Android developers, you might want to take a look, see if he needs any help with anything.
And then the other email came in from Shane Kufel. He goes by in the chat room and on Reddit and stuff like that. And Shane has done a lot of development work for us, too. And he sent in this Jupyter Broadcasting app that he wrote in Java ME, which I guess is for, what, is that Symbian phones and things like that? It actually...
No, it's the old crappy flip phones.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's right. Oh,
Yeah.
that's where I've heard that. That's right, Java ME. So this is like feature phone. This is like a feature phone app for Jupiter Broadcasting. So if anybody has a feature phone that uses Java ME apps, Shane's got you hooked up. This is really, it's actually pretty neat. Now, he sent you kind of like some of the details on how the development on this went, right?
Awful. Yeah. So if you do, if you do have a feature phone, write a nice letter to Shane, because it was not easy to do this, and it was. So Java ME doesn't have a lot of the features one might expect from Java Standard Edition.
Yeah.
And we're not going to go into it too much because I don't think there's many Java ME developers around. And if I'm wrong, email me. But it's a whole different world, and it's a limited world by his reporting. So if you are spamming the chat room, you should probably check out Java ME.
I don't know why Alan is spamming the chat room. That's kind of funny. If you're watching the video version, Alan has just pasted a whole bunch of stuff in the chat room. So thank you both to Not Brian and Shane for...
I think Alan's just dumping people's passwords. Way to go.
Maybe. Well, at least we're recording it and putting it in a show that gets downloaded by a lot of people, so...
Well, I think we need to actually get a picture of Alan in a Guy Fawkes mask now and just kind of superimpose it on the stream. And we'll be good to go.
Man, if only I had that at the ready. Well, while we let that clean off the screen, I'm going to give a quick mention for our affiliate system. This is really how Jupiter Broadcasting pays the bills. I don't have to come on here and tell you about scary things in our water supply that you need to go buy water filters from our special water filter sponsor. All you really need to do is just know about a couple of ways you can support the Jupiter Broadcasting Network, which helps bring shows like Coda Radio to you every single week. Number one, at the bottom of our site, this is the easiest way, is we have links down there for our affiliates for Amazon and Newegg and Best Buy. So if you're going to buy something, click those links first, and then we get credit for what you buy. It's just an affiliate program, and you just, you give us a little percentage of your purchase. And if you want to just turn that on all the time, we have Chrome and Firefox extensions that you can install in your web browser. A quick mention, too, of Code School. I know this is a lot of people in the audience are checking out Code School. It's a great tie-in with this show. You learn by doing. Michael's talked about Code School before. He loves it. And they've got some free Git tutorials on there, like try Git. Check out Code School if you want to learn some of the stuff and actually learn by doing, and we get a little kickback from that if you use the link. Or use the direct contribution options that we have Amazon and PayPal. And then you're just paying us directly. It's not going through some other company. It's not a percentage. It's the full direct amount that you want to contribute to us. And those are some awesome ways to support continued Jupiter Broadcasting shows. All right, so I think I gave time for that stuff to scroll off the chat screen there. I think we've hopefully saved anybody from any embarrassment, if that was. And are you ready for the next topic, sir?
I am. This week's Dev Hoopla.
Dev Hoopla!
Normally, my stories come from Reddit or Hacker News. This time, it comes from a much more, let's say, odd source. The Wall Street Journal.
Okay.
Is apparently decided that pair programming is in fact the way and the light.
Okay.
Now, I've linked the article. So they make a number of reasons that are valid that pair programming is good, right? You check each other's work, real-time debugging, blah, blah, blah. It's all sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
As one of their other main reasons, they list that pair programming will discourage developers slacking off.
Okay, because you're going to keep each other in check, right?
Yeah, and they kind of hit that point pretty hard. So I'm wondering, why are you hiring people you don't trust to do their job?
Yeah, right?
Because I've done pair programming, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're just wasting double the resources.
That sounds like one of the most awful experiences I would ever have.
Well, if it's something easy, both of you sit there, yeah, I know what to do. Who wants to type this out? It's silly. It's really good, though, if there's a hard bug to tackle. You pair on the bug, and that's it. But the Wall Street Journal's author, and I didn't take note of the name, I apologize for that, is suggesting that it's just a way to run. So you should always pair. I can't say that that's efficient. I feel that a lot of the code, at least I write, ends up being boilerplate.
You've had to work like this before.
I volunteered to work like this before.
Is this just to ensure quality? Why would they have you work like this? It just sounds so awful. So unproductive.
So in the good case, you would do it if there's a major bug. That's difficult.
Okay, you're trying to track something down. I'm just understanding why you would do this instead of something like code review or something.
So code reviews can be a little delicate. The problem is, in my experience, the person's either rubber stamps your code or is overly harsh. And having done the reviewing myself, it's really hard to not nitpick on things that don't matter.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Like naming conventions that I might want to enforce that aren't officially sanctioned.
Whereas if you're there during the decision-making process, you understand the context, any compromise that needed to be made, things like that.
Especially if you're dividing a project up by feature. You know, the ideal code review is like 10 minutes long, 20 minutes long. You don't get a good understanding. And also, it relies a lot on personalities. If you get a bad personality in there, and bad could be someone who just doesn't care and says, yeah, it's fine. That's bad.
Yeah.
Also bad is someone with a chip on his shoulder who wants to make you go through every line and discuss, well, why did you name that password?
Or someone who thinks they're just someone who thinks they've got like, I could totally, and that makes a lot of sense now. It's just, boy, that pair, oh boy.
Yeah, I mean, code reviews are generally a good thing, but one mistake I see a lot is that there's always one guy who does all the reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is he wastes an entire day doing code reviews with everybody.
So it's funny when you see these kind of articles, like even from the Wall Street Journal, where they raise some interesting points, but they
raise an interesting point, but to mandate pair programming for an entire day, that just seems like a poor business decision to me.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. Maybe QA could be paired. Maybe, there's this bug and something complex like in this background processing, this threading issue. All right, for sure, pair program that.
Yeah, I could see that.
Another case I've seen it actually work really well is where they take interns and pair program with them, or they take the newest developer. Even if he's not at a junior level, you pair program with him just so he gets a feel for how the people on the team think. And a lot of teams have style guides. A lot of teams have unwritten rules as well.
Sure.
So it has its place. I'm not totally against it. But to say you have to do it 8 hours a day just seems like a waste of resources. And the fact that the Wall Street Journal, of all reputable publications, is pushing it.
What do they know?
Right. But the people who read the Wall Street Journal are the investors. They're the people who really run things.
That's the problem.
To say that
the CTOs and the CIOs and
this will prevent developers from slacking off. Why are you hiring people that you think are reading Reddit all day? Honestly, if you see someone just slacking off, an obscene amount of time, maybe it's time to have a different talk.
Maybe they should be a podcaster instead of a...
Exactly. Maybe they should go on their own. I mean, I'll be honest, I have a hard time working 9 to 5. I have to do it when I am more in the zone.
Have you ever had the thought that when you get really good at something and you watch other people who aren't so good at it, you're like, man, I can sometimes accomplish in 2 hours what takes them all day. So if I just work for 2 hours...
my friend was interested in learning Java programming, and I kept saying that.
Yeah.
I'll just do this one thing for you.
I know. This is why contract work has worked well for me, because 8 hours at one place is it's very hard for me. Not just because it's like a long time, a period of time. That's not it. I get insanely bored. It's freakish how weirdly bored I get, and that I just start crawling out of my skin. I need to get out of there so badly. I have to stay pretty busy and engaged, and I think that's why jumping around helps with that, and that's why pair programming to me sounds like it would be a freakish nightmare.
It's not always bad, especially when there's complex issues, and in fact, I've suggested doing it when there's complex issues. And
could you do it like over TeamSpeak and at your own house?
Oh yeah, remember we recommended that C9 or Cloud9?
Oh yeah,
that's the ideal tool, so you can edit the same document in real time.
So that would be a lot easier if I'm in my own environment. I've got a beverage. I've got maybe some music playing or something like that. It's a little easier. But if I'm sitting at an office at a desk with somebody right next to me, I'm going suicidal after a couple of days of that.
Yeah, and you, in my opinion, you shouldn't be doing it for a couple of days. It should be
a couple of hours. We have
this issue. Yeah, let's pair for an hour and see if we can work through it.
Okay.
Because if you have a bug that takes days to solve, you may have a more severe issue.
True.
And it may be the kind of thing where someone has to go tail between his legs and say, we really screwed this feature up.
We got to think it over again.
Or we might be slipping the schedule here. And if you're spending days on one bug and the entire team's working on it, might want to look at your architecture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on.
Are we going to talk about the rekindled fires?
Yes, I'm just aflutter with heat in my heart.
Now, you have some information in here that I actually haven't heard before, so I am very excited to talk about this.
Sure.
Where do we start?
Amazon has unleashed the Kindle Fire 2.0 upon the world.
Yeah.
There are 3 models, of varying price and varying memory.
Yeah.
So, the one thing that will excite, I think, this audience is that it is, in fact, built on ice cream sandwich.
Oh, man. I have not heard that anywhere. How do you know that?
I Googled it.
Oh, okay, so I just watched. It's funny because I just watched a report this morning on and we're still not clear on what version of Android it ships with. So and the previous ones were what 2.2, I believe, or 2.3.
2.3.
Okay, so we're going to 4.0.
We're going to 4.0, kind of, right? So it's Amazon ice cream sandwich.
Yeah.
That brings up the question: is developing for the Kindle Fire the same as developing for Android? I mean, it has different in-app purchase APIs. It's kind of a different device.
So are you writing for Android, or is it something more specific to Amazon?
Well, I think you can get away with it if you're writing a Galaxy Nexus app. The question is, it doesn't seem like the Kindle Fire is going to have the power of the Galaxy Nexus. I'm sorry, the Nexus 7.
Kindle Fire doesn't... Well, you're talking about the cheaper one. You're not talking about the one that
I'm
has
talking about the $200 one.
Yeah. Okay.
Because let's play a little game here.
Okay.
The Kindle Fire is a low end product.
Right. That's what's really going to sell. Right. That's what's going to sell.
Right. The one that's closer in price to the iPad is not going to sell. Because most people would probably buy an iPad. I'm sorry, I don't see it. Because everybody I know, normal users who have a Kindle Fire, bought it because it was $200.
Okay. You're probably right.
And they're all unhappy with the crappy scrolling and the poor performance.
Okay, so you really are up to date on this, because that's the other thing that's coming out in the videos is that it's the... Now, are you talking about the Kindle Fire 7?
I'm talking about the original Kindle Fire.
Oh, yeah. Well, the Kindle Fire 7, the new one also is being reported as being laggy, and performance is not so good. So that's an
issue, and these are relatives and friends. They don't blame the device. They blame the apps.
Yeah, right. It makes you look bad as a developer.
Why does Angry Birds suck on the Kindle Fire but not the iPad is exactly how they phrase it.
Yeah.
And we can explain that, well, Amazon modified Android and they really, they wanted this to be a cheap product, so they didn't put in the RAM. The processor's not that good. The animations take up a lot of memory. And all they hear is blah, 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 blah.
I am almost of the opposite opinion. I almost wonder if regular users don't notice it. Because
in my experience, they notice quite a bit.
Well, think about how many people don't think that Android 2.2 and 2.3 feels slow to them. Like, they don't see the stuttering, they don't see it. And for me, I felt like I could see the frames. And I felt like why am I the only person that sees this? Why don't I? And then when they came out with Project Butter, I felt so vindicated that they were admitting there was a frame rate issue. And then all of a sudden, everybody was talking about it, but nobody cared. Nobody said anything. And why wouldn't it be exactly the same thing?
Because that's a bad comparison.
Okay.
The stuttering issue in stock Android, or most normal forms of Android, were not quite as extreme as the Kindle Fire. I have one. There are times when you'll tap a button and it won't respond for a solid second.
Yeah, they were just showing a demo of the new Kindle Fire, and they tap the books icon, and then like 2 or 3 seconds go by until the books actually load.
And I have my Android 2.2, I think it's like HTC something here, and it doesn't have that problem. It can't scroll if its life depended on it. But
yeah, that's way worse.
The issues on the Kindle Fire are much more pronounced and much more extreme. Now, I hoped, and I wrote an article saying that it looks like all they're trying to do with this is make it better, so fix the first one.
Right.
You're saying that there's been videos, which I haven't seen, that show it is in fact not fixed.
Yeah, I just played one. Yeah, it doesn't...
So that changes the tone of this, right? I was going to go in and talk about how hopeful that is for Android developers. But if the same issues exist, you run the risk of hurting your app's name, your brand's name. Because the users aren't going to say the Kindle Fire is slow. They're going to say,
right.
Angry Birds is slow.
And this is actually exactly what I just railed on Canonical for on this this week's episode of Linux Action Show, because Canonical's having performance issues because of a bug in Compiz that's going to affect Valve in those games.
Right.
Yeah, Darian Fireball's John Gruber already has a post up on his site saying the L word and the Kindle Fire, and the L word stands for leggy.
Laggy.
And Droid Life has a review posted, and Droid Life was pretty disappointed in how leggy it was.
That's severely disappointing to me. You know, there comes a point, at least I find, when developing a project, I have to either, if it's my own project or with a client, sit down and say, what type of customer do you want to have? Do you want to hit the widest market and make some sacrifices to your project, to your product? Or do you want to hit something more powerful? For instance, the Kindle Fire, I would say the high-end version is the Nexus 7. I keep calling it Galaxy 7. Now they're the same price.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no question in my mind that the Nexus 7 is a much better product in that comparison.
Yeah. And another slightly disturbing thing is Amazon has changed their policy, and they did this a while ago, and it didn't get a lot of press, which I found odd. So did you know, Chris, previously, when that free app of the day thing came out, you got 20% of your list price for each purchase.
Okay.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Now you get nothing.
Yeah, I know.
So what is this taken all together? The crappiness of the hardware.
Yeah.
The pushing of content. Yep.
It's not for you. I think that's where you're off track here. The Kindle Fire isn't for you or for developers. It's a cash register in your house for Amazon.com and for streaming Prime videos. That's all it is.
Exactly. But the side effect of that is it further commoditizes software. So there was a great article, and if I can find it, I'll put it in the notes, where someone went around taking a survey of just, average people, in quotes, and they see the Amazon App Store as the place to get free applications. This is 10 miles past the road that Apple started. People want to rail against Apple for, 99 cents. Amazon says, yeah, free. Just wait. It'll come up on free app of the day. And, I challenge the listeners to Google this and, find a case where free app of the day helped the developer, because I found many cases where it did not.
Well, they do make their margins. So Apple, the argument would be, because Apple's margins come from the hardware product themselves, they really aren't that tied to revenue from the iTunes Store. And the financials back that out. But the reverse is true with Amazon. They need the App Store to generate profit in order for them to earn money off of that Kindle tablet. So they do kind of need software to sell.
They don't, though. Software is just an also-ran. It's just to say, oh yeah, we have Angry Birds, but look at all our nice movies and books. So it's first a media tablet, and the software is just a line on the spec sheet. Yeah.
It's a window shopping device too. They have a very nice Amazon app on there that lets you window shop. It's kind of neat.
And I've had this discussion actually earlier this morning with a client of mine. It's easy to say, yeah, but on Google Play, most people put ads in anyway. But that's not good. I mean, that's not. I'm not saying that Amazon's worse than Google or Apple. I'm saying that from a development perspective, the fact that the in-app purchases APIs are different. So, meaning for most apps, you're going to be doing more work if you're trying to monetize it. You need to support another form factor, and it's unlikely that you're going to generate a ton of revenue. Is there a reason to target this when you could just target, the Nexus 7?
Well, see, that's what I'm thinking. And the reason why backing the Kindle as a developer would have made sense was if the Nexus 7 didn't materialize, and if Google just couldn't execute on a tablet. But now we've actually seen them execute pretty well. People are looking at this Nexus 7 tablet, and you can see where Google made conscious decisions not to implement, so that way they could guarantee quality. And I believe, and now I'm not sure, I haven't seen any recent numbers, but I think they're selling more than they can build. So
they are actually. So mine died randomly.
Oh, really?
And I had a call for support, and I'm still waiting for a replacement. That was about 2 weeks ago. So they are beyond capacity.
So clearly now, because when you combine just the popularity of the Nexus 7 plus all the other standard straight-up Android tablets, that seems like that's the horse.
And I would say that the Nexus 7 users are going to be more inclined. They're going to be, quote, higher value users.
The problem is, to be honest with you completely, if I was, say, going to buy a a tablet for a family member, like as a gift, for the price point, for the simplicity, and because my whole family loves Amazon, I would probably get a Kindle for them. if it's not an iPad.
Yeah, I gave many of my relatives the first Kindle Fire.
But you understand what I'm saying? I mean, I think my purchasing decision would be between a Kindle or the iPad.
Yeah.
Especially if Apple comes out with a $200 something iPad mini thing.
Yeah, I still have some misgivings, or I find that hard to believe, but
yeah. So
here's the bottom line.
Yeah, what is the bottom line?
You're making an Android app. Does it make sense to port it to the Kindle Fire as well? And I would say that depends. If your business model is freemium or free, then absolutely. If you're trying to make money, maybe. I mean, the other problem is that last time anybody did the research, the Amazon App Store was in fact more profitable than the Google Play Store by a sad margin, to be honest with you.
I bet that's changing now, though. I bet it's got to.
I hope it is. You might want to criticize Google Play for that odd name
and the bad layout.
Yeah,
and the fact that apps seem to come like last in the list of everything else they sell.
Chris might want to criticize them a lot
and
more.
The bad search. And the crappy apps that are listed in there that are sort of knockoffs of legitimate apps.
Hey, did you hear about this thing called a Nexus Q?
I'm just saying, Play has some issues, and I think that's why there's even the Amazon store, and that's why the Amazon store is even a credible competitor when they're on Google's own platform that Google created. I mean, that is just crazy to me. It's because Google isn't really taking care of the store in a way that really makes it amazing for developers to have their applications featured.
Well, it's long been my contention that Google has no interest in you making money by selling your app. They have an interest in you putting advertising in your app.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess so.
I mean, to me, that is what it is. But, the other issue is the F word, fragmentation. Amazon.
Maybe we should talk about fragmentation after Wednesday, because I think Apple's about to introduce some fragmentation.
Yeah, but okay, I know what you're talking about. We can talk about it later.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I mean, I think fragmentation might be a little bit of a misnomer now with the changes they're making in Android, with Jelly Bean and even starting an ice cream sandwich. They've really sort of addressed a lot of. My understanding is
Google has. Amazon has no interest in it.
Ha.
That's the thing you're forgetting. Amazon is not in any way. Amazon is less tied to Google than, say, Samsung.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Amazon doesn't care what Google does. In fact,
Amazon could put WebOS on the back end and just run their Amazon UI on top of it.
Look at the UI on the Kindle Fire. If that was written in HTML5, for how slow it is, I'd be shocked.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't want to be a platform company, or either they don't want to, or they don't have the expertise.
Right.
And I'm sure there's plenty of smart developers there, and I'm sure there's just a business decision that got made. Software is just a commodity to them. Because you can't tell me that it's hard to do a scroll view of app icons. I'm sorry. Everybody else can do it. I've done it. You can't tell me that it's so challenging unless you decided to go some weird HTML5, which they have done. Look at their new Kindle readers. They're pushing it really hard, and they're ignoring that it's not a good user experience and that it's not, fast.
Why do you suppose that is? Because, obviously when you look at it, you can tell. What's funny is Jeff Bezos was up there, and I watched the whole presentation, and it was a Steve Jobs presentation down to the cadence where he built up feature after feature after feature, and then the price. And then he said, and then what are we going to do if we can, pack so much more stuff, and then we have $200 more where we're going to add this, and we're going to add this, and then boom, it's this price. And it was so Apple that it almost felt like Samsung was doing the presentation.
So it wasn't Apple. That's the problem. Apple wouldn't have had a feature list that long. What they would have had is 3 features, and they would have all been perfect or very, very good.
Well, now you're saying perfect in the consumer sense now. You're going to get a bunch of hate mail, people saying you're an Apple lover.
I'm saying perfect in the sense that when you scroll a view, it doesn't look like garbage.
Oh, polished.
Yes. Yeah. Amazon had a whole litany of features, and they all felt like they were done by interns, and that there was no QA. And if anybody works at Amazon, I apologize, and I'm sure it's not your fault. I'm sure that you're under a tremendous pressure to hit all these line items, and that's fine. But I would love the Kindle to do well. I would love for it to be a competitor to the Nexus 7.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I would like it to kill the rest of the Android market, or the tablet market. because they do have a better store infrastructure than even Google.
And Amazon's got a good, store backend system. I mean, there's a lot of integration there they could do that's compelling with their Prime service and their,
Right, they have a lot, and their APIs are fantastic.
Yeah.
And you can integrate EC2 at a very reasonable rate if you're an Android Amazon developer.
That's cool.
But I mean, when the user can't scroll a view without a jagged animation, that shouldn't have got through QA.
Are you going to get one? Are you going to try one out and see?
No, because it's not. I can't, in good conscience, recommend any of my clients to develop for it without laying out all these risks. And my clients, at least, are very focused on user experience. I can tell you right now, jagged scrolling won't fly.
Do you think from the business perspective that focusing on, do you think your clients focus on the user experience because those people who care about that are more likely to spend money, or is that an unfair stereotype?
That is the reason. I call them higher value users.
Yeah, I think that could be insulting to some people to hear you say that.
Well, how is it insulting? I mean, they're the only people who buy apps. Or they're the people who buy apps in mass numbers.
Because they're willing to spend that kind of money on the hardware in the first place, so they're more comfortable spending.
No. I consider the Nexus 7 users high-value users.
Oh,
I'm not just saying Apple users.
Or Samsung Galaxy Nexus 3.
Absolutely.
Or the Galaxy S3 would be a high-value user, absolutely.
A low-value user is someone who goes to Verizon and gets the free Android phone. Because they're running, they don't care that they're running old software. So they're unlikely to be super interested in having the latest and greatest apps.
Right. We all know that person who's proud of the fact he's never spent any. He's only has free apps on his device.
Right. And I don't mean to denigrate or insult that person.
That's just their priority.
They're not the target in a lot of ways. I mean, it's
just like this show isn't targeted to people who want to listen to a My Little Pony podcast.
Right. I mean, I hate to say it, but there's probably a lot of advertisers you can't get because your listeners know how to back up a hard drive.
That's very true. That is exactly our problem.
So the problem is your users aren't, to those companies, low value.
Right.
But they're in fact more technically savvy and in some abstract way better.
And if the right advertiser, if they knew that,
it would be high value.
Like, a perfect example is Scale Engine.
Yeah.
Alan gets a nice steady trickle of customers from the show because the people who watch TechSnap, when they hear bits and pieces about Scale Engine, they're like, holy crap, that's a great idea. That's exactly how it should be done. And so they become customers.
Exactly. And I'm sure Code School must do fairly well off this show.
Yeah, they definitely get, you know what? I think on average, we see 3 or 4 people sign up through Code School a week.
Right. So it's not that I'm saying these people are bad who don't buy apps. I'm saying why target them when they're not the ones who are someone in the chat just said putting food on the table. Exactly. I have nothing against them, but I can't target, and my clients can't target users who aren't interested in purchasing anything or generating revenue because it's only a cost. And on the flip side, if you can't provide a good experience, the market you end up targeting is unlikely to want to buy your app.
That seems like a very harsh but very true reality.
I mean, when the Kindle Fire first came out, the original one, I was the biggest fan. I wanted it to do well. I bought one before it was even available. I bought it pre-ordered. But it's just a disappointing implementation, and
yeah,
I think they have a bit of work to do. And I know I'm deep in the negativity on the freedom zone.
No, you're being practical, and I think you've nailed it. And the fact that you're sitting here saying, "But look, the Nexus 7, that's them doing it right," and that is
the Nexus, and it proves that you can do that correctly.
Yeah, and I think it was exactly the shot in the arm that the Android tablet market needed really badly. And Google nailed it with the timing too. They hit it mid-product cycle for Apple, so people hadn't just spent a bunch of money on an iPad 3. They hit it mid-product cycle for the iPhone. They hit it mid-product cycle for previous Android tablet releases, so they weren't competing with any other big tablet releases. I mean, Google really nailed the execution. And then looking at the Nexus 7, where you see they've got room in there for a camera, but they decided, you know what, we just can't do it good enough. We're not going to do it. That shows restraint. And the LTE chipset that's in there but not active yet. Restraint, I think, is a key to making these tablets a really good product because they're limited devices. They're not fully capable.
One thing I've been recommending, and I don't actually answer all the emails on the show, and we get a lot. I'm sure you've seen them from college students wanting to make a product or an app or even an open source app, I say cut your feature list down and do 2 or 3 things well and dump everything else. And I think that's kind of what Amazon needs to do.
You're absolutely right about that. Amazon's actual fundamental nature is throw everything at it and see what sticks. They have it so they're also making really as good of a Kindle app for every other competing platform they can too at the same time. And I think some people would look at that and say, why are you focusing on iPad Kindle apps when you are making a competing product?
Well, I think that's just pragmatism.
Right, but that's how Amazon operates. So they say, well, we're going to make a bunch of tablets, we're going to make a bunch of Kindles, and whatever sells, that's what's we're going to go with. Yeah.
All right. So I think we should move on from this. Bottom line, I'm not sure that the Kindle Fire is, even with this new version, a great target.
No, but on the flip side, you could always bet your horse on the new Nokias.
I'm going to be devil's advocate here because I'm impressed.
Oh, you are? Okay.
I am impressed with the Lumia 920. Now, the thing is, I've never been able to play with a 920 or an Atrix, the Samsung version. I find it odd that Samsung seems to be, I see them as the premier Android company, and they're going with Windows Phone.
Oh, well, sure.
So
that's their bag, man. That's their bag.
Yeah.
And I say good on them. I think it's a perfect position for Samsung to make money from both sides, right?
Right. And I think it's very pragmatic of them, particularly given that they just got sued for like $1 billion.
Now, why I laugh when we talk about the Nokia stuff is because they just goofed like the announcement with all of the phony images and the stuff like that just sort of zapped all credibility, and it makes them sound like they're not prepared, like they're doing.
Yeah, and really, when you read the sheet, the phone's actually impressive. They just fumbled the ball a little bit on the marketing.
All right, so tell me about it. What impresses you?
Well, I mean, I'm not a camera person, but the camera is very good.
Yes, that new PureView technology.
Whatever. That's like Apple calls Light Peak Thunderbolt because they can't call it Light Peak just to make me crazy. So what has me impressed with Nokia and the Samsung Atrix and kind of the Windows Phone 8 ecosystem is that it's new. There's a lot of room for growth. And I think what's going to happen is it's never going to be as big as the Apple one or even the Android one. But I think there's going to be a time when a few developers can get in there and make a good deal of money. And it'll before it turns into either failure or gold rush.
If somebody was in the Windows 8 marketplace right now, they'd probably be making all of the money. Because there's all of IT administrators and developers are trying it out, and they're buying the apps just to see how it is. And if you're in there early enough,
you can get in. Yeah. Now, the other thing is, it's easy to criticize a lot of the things Microsoft has done, but they're doing a lot of very good developer-focused things with Windows 8, Phone 8 at least. You have a multitude of development stacks to pick. You can do your XAML, C#, HTML5, JavaScript. You can have your, your Direct 2D, C++, C++ XAML. I mean, the list goes on. They also allow you to do demos and free trials, which is something that neither Google nor Apple will allow.
Yeah, that is nice.
From an API, going through the API docs, going through MSDN, they have a lot of the things people have been complaining about, developers have been complaining about, they've addressed in some way. So the question is, A, you're an existing .NET developer, because I know there's actually a lot of you that listen. Can you actually jump into Windows Phone? And I would say probably.
What's the picture look for those who developed applications for Windows Phone 7? Because it's a totally different OS now, right?
Have you ever heard the song Smile by Nat King Cole?
Yeah.
So the deal is your app will run. You will not have access to a number of the APIs.
Your app runs, though.
Your app runs.
Well, okay. All right. Okay.
But it's going to become increasingly important to move away from Windows Phone 7 and to adopt Windows 8 and Metro.
Now, you don't feel a little hostility towards Microsoft for pulling the rug out on developers after just...
There weren't enough of...
I know.
How many were there? And I think it needed to be done.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. You know what's crazy is when I search for the Samsung Atrix, all I get
Right.
responses from Google are for the Motorola Atrix. So now Android phones have already been named the same. We have a Samsung Atrix and a Motorola Atrix. And to be honest with you, Lumia 920 is not that memorable either.
No, they do have a little bit of a branding issue. But let's just take this more from a developer, because we've been very code light this episode.
Okay.
Let's say you're a .NET developer. One issue you're going to find is that there's only a portion of the .NET framework available to you via Metro. And you're going to see, you're going to have to adhere to sandboxing. You're going to have to adhere to a number of, I'd say they're not as restrictive as Apple, but there's a number of rules with the Windows marketplace. Is that worth it? And see, it's a very frightening but very exciting time, I think, for .NET developers, because you can troll it all you want and say, no way, they're never going to beat Android. You can be a troll. But if you're a professional .NET developer now, I find it hard to believe you're not looking at this.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
saying, if I can get in at the bottom floor, look what all the Cocoa developers did when iPhone came out, when iOS SDK 2 came out, so they could actually use Cocoa. This could be where you go. Now, there's a few holes. We talked about XNA being missing. We talked about, Microsoft is really pushing C++ very, very hard. And for a lot of developers, that's not a comfortable position to be in, especially C# developers and Java developers. But you can still use C#. I think you can even use VBasic, but I'm not sure about that.
Oh.
I didn't bother reading that. I read the C# and C++ docs.
Yeah.
And no offense to Visual Basic developers. It's just not my cup of tea. Chris, I think I might start developing for it.
Why? Because you're that impressed by the operating system?
I like the UI. There, I said it. I came out, so to speak. I think it's new, and I think it's bold, and it's different.
I'll give you that, but it feels like it's very limited.
But it's a phone. To be clear, we're only talking about the phone right now.
Okay, yeah, you know what? It does work really well as a phone UI.
We're talking about Windows Phone 8, because actually it's slightly... So between Windows Phone 8 and Windows 8, there's some API differences.
So when you look at this thing, it's got a pretty robust operating system.
Right.
It's got a new UI. It's got an LTE chipset in there. Well, that's pretty nice. It's got a great camera. Supposedly.
It's got a great camera. Now, the issue is, what about the ecosystem? You're a developer. Let's say you're a C# ninja. So we're gonna give you all the required skills here. You have a choice. Do you take a risk on Windows Phone? Why not? I mean, what do you lose? Maybe you hang out in IRC and a lot of people troll you, as I'm sure they're going to troll me. But to be honest, I'm a Cocoa developer. I get trolled all the time. It's a new market. I mean, think about this. When the iPhone first came out, how many people made money with somewhat low-quality apps because there were no apps to buy?
Well, I thought about this when I was checking out the Windows 8 App Store.
Right.
I thought, boy, if I had a Jupiter Broadcasting Metro app, I bet I'd pick up a few thousand new viewers, because there really is not much in here and people want content.
And you would want a Jupiter Broadcasting Metro app, hint, hint, to the people.
I would, yes.
Now, so back to the API issues. If you're not used to dealing with restrictions, you may have a problem. They're pretty restrictive on how you can do threading and networking. I'm sorry, background processing for networking. So you're going to have to, I've seen some scary .NET apps that have some issues. You're going to have to learn, how to use, let's say, Chris, in C#, there's a keyword called await.
Okay.
That is the equivalent of about 10 lines of Objective-C.
Oh, that's nice.
So Microsoft has made a lot of these tools very easy to use.
I have heard that from a lot of developers.
It almost seems silly to not try it out. What would you do? Develop for the Kindle Fire? Maybe. Develop for Android? Maybe. The only issue I see is I think it'd be hard to choose this as a main platform without going cross platforms.
As a developer, though, don't you want to be where all the action's at? I mean, there's got to be action. I mean, yeah, you can get some initial bump, but if the platform fizzles like it did with Windows Phone 7...
Well, that's the risk. Will the platform fizzle?
And we've already seen Windows Phone 7 just sort of fizzle out.
Well, what's really interesting is I've been following the coverage on the tech blogs. A lot of bipolar websites out there. You know, they've been praising Windows 8 and now they hate Windows 8. Now they praise it, now they hate it.
Yeah.
So I don't know where Windows 8 is going to go on the phone. I think it's time and the market's ready for a third competitor.
Well, and getting back to the developer perspective here for a second, if I understand correctly, Windows Phone 8, writing an application for Windows Phone 8 and writing an application for Windows 8 desktop is sort of as achievable as we were talking about earlier when going from the iPad to the Mac. Am I right? And like,
yeah, it's pretty similar.
So so you're almost sort of doubling your market potential there. So I guess
right. If you're already a seasoned .NET developer, it would be silly not to try it, in my opinion.
Because you're not targeting just Windows Phone.
Right. You would be targeting potentially that Microsoft tablet coming out, and potentially, I know, was it Sony or not Sony? Another company is actually releasing a tablet shortly.
If you had, Samsung's going to do a Windows 8.
Samsung,
yeah,
Samsung.
And Samsung could make something compelling there. Wouldn't that be interesting? Because if it works on the phone, the UI, which you admittedly like, and I would say I don't dislike it either. I'm not saying I don't know. I haven't really used it much, so
Coward. Continue.
Well, I hate it on the desktop, but I'm saying maybe on the phone it could work, but I just would need to use it. I just have such a negative experience on the desktop. But I could, if it would work on the phone, I actually think more so it would work on the tablet because a big part of Metro UI is horizontal scrolling, and the way they design the UI is so that things kind of hang off the side a little bit, so the user intuitively knows just to scroll over to get more content. And that seems like that would work really well on a tablet to me. I have always thought, since I've seen Metro UI from day one, I thought that's a tablet UI.
Yeah, I think it will work well. I think, you know, the big question here is with any new platform, user adoption. And as a guy who jumped on WebOS like it was a life raft, I understand what happens. I understand the pain, and you sink some costs into buying.
Was that life raft named Titanic?
Yeah, it was bad. I still like WebOS. I don't care. I will argue to the death that WebOS is one of the best tablet experiences.
Open WebOS for life.
You know, I would love to see a company pick that up and actually manufacture a tablet specifically designed for Open WebOS.
Yeah. Because
also the Enyo, I mean, we're getting way off track, but I'm in love with WebOS. The Enyo JavaScript framework, one of the most powerful JavaScript frameworks around.
Sad. Sad. I'm gonna go hang out with WebOS and BOS after the show.
It's a shame what happened to WebOS because it was a real contender. Like technically, from a user experience point of view, it was beautiful.
That just happens from time to time.
Yeah, good platforms die when there's when the time isn't right. And I feel Windows 8 phone at least may be able to survive only because iOS is looking pretty old.
Mm-hmm.
Android's not looking too much younger. I would say Android's like middle-aged. iOS is, applying for AARP. And if you're not American, that's the Association of Retired Persons.
Yeah, Metro does. The whole Windows Phone thing does have some stink behind it. I'll give you that. And it'd be interesting to see if it does seem adoption. If it does, and people are in there at the right time, they're going to make some money.
Yeah, I think they'll see adoption in the corporate space at least.
The question will be, will Windows Phone users pay for apps?
Probably not.
Because, you could look at the Android market, right? Huge adoption. But the money is still predominantly made through the iTunes store.
That's going to be the second issue, but first you have to see if people buy the phone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Still, I think this is a new platform that's ripe for a few brave frontiersmen to go in there and see what they can do with this new technology.
And see how well a Jupyter Broadcasting app could do.
Yeah, in fact, those of you who've spent your time writing Java ME apps, this will hurt less. Significantly less, actually.
I wonder, though, the problem with that, and it's the same problem with iTunes, is you got to run their system. So it's, yeah.
But Windows is so easy to VM. I'm sorry, but
no, okay, I'll give you that.
I mean, and particularly if you want to do it via other means. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we should wrap up because I'm trying to keep our shows to an hour.
Oh, well, okay. You're short a little. I mean, you're over a little bit, but it's okay. It's okay.
So I didn't even have a code sample this week. I feel so sad.
It's all right. You're over by 10 minutes, so it's an hour and 10 so far. But people I think like them long, so don't worry about it.
Do they?
The comments we got. So you don't read YouTube comments, but people are on YouTube are like epic, nearly 2 hours.
Well, the last time I read the YouTube comments, they thought I was somebody from the Faux Show. Ironically, I had never even heard of the Faux Show before the YouTube comments.
Well, you should now you should do faux radio or coder faux or something like that. That'd be funny. Although
and I feel bad for the guy from the Faux Show because apparently they don't like him.
No, that guy on the Faux Show is a jerk.
He's a tool.
Yeah. Well, the problem is he's overexposed. I just see him all the time.
Oh, I know. Never mind.
All right, book of the week.
All right, book of the week. Code Complete by the Microsoft Press. Why? Because I'm a troll. No. Code Complete is actually a really good book. It's written by Stephen McConnell. He's one of the graybeards of software wisdom. If you've played Skyrim, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a big book, so I'm not going to be able to give you a synopsis. But
one of the books.
Yeah, I would read this. If you haven't read it yet, go ahead and read it.
Wow, there you go. So that is, again, Code Complete, a practical handbook of software construction.
It is also available via Kindle version if you have a subpar device. So.
Oh, not nice. I like my Kindle.
Oh, I'm sorry. I like the e-ink Kindles are fine. I have one. They're good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
My tool of the week.
All right.
Since I have an issue maintaining what I need to do, is a task list called Productive. Literally Productive, 2 E's. So what it is it integrates with your Google account, which is epic if you're using Google Apps for business.
Nice.
It has a Chrome app, which is amazing, an iPhone app, and I believe an Android. It does have an Android app.
Okay, so far I'm digging this.
It's free. You put it in any of your devices. It's very, very cross-platform. There's even a Mac app, actually. It'll notify you at set intervals before it's time to complete a task. You can prioritize tasks by urgency, category, and you can invite people to share on the task with you. So let's say you have clients that maybe need to supply you some art assets for something you're doing, or need to supply you some business rules or an Excel sheet or something like that. It's one of those things that's very small, but
I love that it ties in with Google Calendar and Gmail. You know, it's kind of becoming like the new Outlook, isn't it? Like where you get all this stuff that integrates with it. That's cool, though.
The sad part is when I'm looking at new tools to try, if it doesn't tie into Google Apps, it doesn't get tried.
Well, that's kind of the thing. So yeah, it looks like they have Mac OS, iPhone, Android, and a Windows desktop application. And then there's also some third-party apps. Yeah, gosh, this looks really cool. So Productive, that's Product T-E-E-V, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes.
And is the Windows app is not Metro, so I can't use it yet. It's disappointing.
Oh yeah, because you're only using Metro apps.
Of course.
Yeah. So how you do? What do you use it for your instant messenger? Oh, nothing, because there's no Metro instant messenger. Oh, that's right. Okay.
Actually, I've been on my off time. I've been on my Ubuntu machine quite a bit.
Nice. Well, there you go. There you go. And you didn't spill coffee on that one.
No, but I do have a latte ready to go.
Oh, good. Well, hopefully that laptop watches out unless it misbehaves. All right, everyone. Well, here's the details. If you would like to email us and get your feedback into the show, maybe something we said sounded crazy or something you'd like to hear us cover or hear our thoughts on, send those in. coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com, and Michael slavishly reads those and then responds to them here on the show most of the time, unless he has a client catastrophe, and that's understandable, right?
Yeah, so I'm a little behind.
Yeah, it happens. Where can people follow you during the week, sir?
You can find me on my website at mdominic.com. You can find me at Dumanuku on Twitter and app.net. You can also find me on Google+.
And I'm Chris LAS on Twitter, and I'm Chris Fisher on Google+. And also I'm Chris at jupiterbroadcasting.com. You can also use the contact form at the top of Jupiter Broadcasting. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Coder Radio. Join us live Mondays at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern at jblive.tv, or download it Monday afternoons over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. And we'll see you right back here next week.